Zoom platform is a little newer for us. We will be recording it. So if y'all need to access the recording, then you can let us know and we'll get that to you. I'm going to just hand it right over to our featured presenter today. Gary, you have the floor.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Gary O'Neill, and I am here to talk to you about acing your interview. We'll jump right into it, but before we jump right into it, I kind of wanted to give you a little bit of background on myself so you kind of understand the perspective that I come from. So I have been a hiring manager, I've been an entrepreneur, I've started businesses, but for about the last 20 years, I've run recruiting teams that have worked for the likes of huge Fortune 50 companies, Microsoft, Dell, and others, all the way down to little teeny tiny startups in just about every industry that you can possibly think of, with the exception of healthcare, quite frankly. Along the way, I have been inside of at least 350 different companies in some significant way with regard to how they go about hiring. And I can tell you every single one of them is different. I've been witness to or a part of well over 10,000 hires at this point in time, which means probably somewhere in the neighborhood of, wow, 50 or 60,000 interviews that I've seen happen and the results of. I interview people every single day. In fact, I had an interview with someone just this morning, and I was trying to do the math on how many I've conducted. So I've been doing what I do for about 20 years. And I would say that over the course of that time, 5 to 10 interviews a week for that period of time. So thousands. So I've been involved with recruiting and hiring and people getting hired and coaching and talking to people about job search for some time. So I'm here to share everything that I possibly can in the time that we've got about how to ace your interview. I'd love for it to be interactive. If you got some questions and things along the way, Karen will be answering some of those. I'll pause periodically so that we can dive into some of the things that are special or unique or what have you to you. So without further ado, let's go. By the way, this is my LinkedIn address. Please connect with me. You can find me, Gary O'Neill, and on LinkedIn. I'll be showing you some more about LinkedIn here in just a bit.
And Gary, can I jump in real quick?
Of course.
Would you like to go ahead and launch this poll and we could understand a little bit more about the people who are here?
Sure, absolutely. Okay. Why don't you launch the poll?
There, I think I launched polling. There we go. All right. So this is asking about what focus you have for your next position. Good. It's fun to see that poll work. Understand a little bit more about who we have here today. Let's see, we have about 70% of people have voted. We'll leave it open for just another second. And okay, I'll go ahead and end that. Gary, you can
sure
see that.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
Oh, good. Perfect. So here is the general outline. And by the way, rather than doing a PowerPoint presentation, what I prefer to do on this particular topic is that there is a handout. And Karen, do they have access to that handout?
I will put a link for that.
Oh. Okay. So there will be a handout, and it's a PDF document, and it's the exact same one that I'm using here on the screen, because my notion is that if I use this to walk through, then it'll be a more useful tool for you when you're thinking about and preparing for your interview. So we're really going to break this down in 4 parts: a brief introduction, then we're going to talk about preparing for your interview. And quite frankly, if we did nothing more than the section on preparing for your interview, that's the majority of what it is that you need to know. And I'll just say right now that of all the interviews that I conduct, and it's a lot, I would say that less than 5% of everyone I interview is even remotely well prepared for their interview. And I think it may be because people just don't know what to do or how to be properly prepared for an interview. But we're going to spend the bulk of our time talking about how to properly prepare. Because when you're properly prepared, then the notion of the next section 3, performing in the interview, is kind of a no-brainer, right? It becomes so much better, so much easier. It's all in the preparation, quite frankly. But we will talk about some of the techniques you can use in terms of answering questions and others in the performance of your interview, and then progress afterwards. So prepare, perform, progress after the interview. So without further ado, let's go. So the first thing I want to tell you about an interview is that, the interview is not about you. And though it might feel like there's a person who is examining you, evaluating you, and the rest, the real truth of the matter is that they're trying to ascertain whether or not you're the person who can help solve their problems. Because the truth is that no one hires anyone unless there's a problem to solve. Sometimes it's a good problem. We have too much business. We have too much work to do. Those are good problems. Sometimes it's a bad problem. Things are broken. Things aren't working right. But regardless, no one hires anyone unless there's a problem to solve. So one of my number one suggestions to you with regard to acing your interview is to really go into the interview understanding that, one, it's not about getting a job. It's really not. And it's not even talking about you. It's really diving into and having a discussion with someone about your ability to solve the problem that they have. Now, that's not to say that the interviewer understands all the things that I'm telling you about. I'm just saying that as the person going into an interview, if you understand that you're there to solve problems, then things will go so much better. And I guess the simple way to put it is this, is that in an interview, it may feel like one person's on one side of the table or one side of the camera nowadays, and the other person's on the other side. They're looking at you and they're evaluating you. I guess there's some truth in that, but here's what happens is that if during the course of the interview, you can begin to have a conversation about the problem that needs to be solved, the situation that exists. And by the end of the interview, if you and the interviewer are essentially talking about the problem and talking about how you're going to solve the problem and how you can help them solve, then something went really well. So I'm not suggesting that if that doesn't happen, that things didn't go well. I'm just saying that there will never be a case where if you're in an interview, if during the course of the interview, you don't shift the conversation over to a discussion about the problem, how you're going to solve the problem, and that's what you're talking about, and it shifts from feeling about them evaluating you to having a discussion about the problem. If that happens, things went really well. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some techniques that you can use to do that. But the thing that I also want to help you understand, or that I want you to think about, is that it's not just ultimately the problem that the company has to solve. Think about the problem that the person you're interviewing with has, and how you can help them solve their problem. So as an example, right here under 1.1, that first bullet point, take the pressure off yourself and focus on what's the problem at hand. And, part of it is, what is the interviewer's problem? What's the hiring manager's problem? What's the company's problem? So let's walk through those real quick. I won't belabor this, but the interviewer's problem. So I'm a recruiter. I'm an executive recruiter. I run recruiting teams, but anytime someone who's not the hiring manager, isn't a technical interviewer, isn't necessarily on the team, the problem that I have that you could help me solve is that my problem is that I have to present some professionals, some people over to a team, hiring managers or rest. And it doesn't matter whether I'm an internal recruiter or whether I'm a third-party recruiter. It doesn't matter. My problem is that I've got a bunch of people to talk to. I've got a hiring team and a hiring manager who is dependent upon me being able to present to them people who are going to be qualified, interested, and available. And my problem is that I have to quickly ascertain whether you might be that person. And ultimately, as a recruiter, what I'm looking for and what matters to me is when I present you over and you have that conversation with somebody, statistically, you're not going to get hired. What I mean by that is, I'll present 6-8 people, maybe more, for every single position where only one's going to get hired. But my problem is that I still need that hiring team, the hiring manager and the other, to say, hey, that was a great use of my time. And what that means is that I need you to be easy to work with. I need you to be a clear communicator. I need you to be engaged in the conversation. I need you to care about the problem. I need you to care about the people I'm going to present you to. And I need you to be engaged in a way that it isn't all just about you, and it isn't all just about getting a job. It's about your root motivations, your those kinds of things. Because my risk is that if I present you and you aren't like that, then I'm going to get feedback from the hiring manager and others that says, hey, that was a total waste of my time. So just recognize that even in the early stage conversations, the person who you're talking to has a problem to solve. And the more you can help them solve that problem, the better off you're going to be. Let me back it up one step, which is even prior to an interview. I reach out to people sometimes, and the response that I get to them from them through email or LinkedIn or what have you is something along the lines of, well, what does it pay? That's not the problem that I've got to solve. And is that really where you want to start the conversation? So my point in this is to say that recognize that your job in an interview always is to get to the next step. Eventually, the next step is an offer. And through the course of all these conversations that you're going to have via email, via phone, every single communication you have with someone, focus on trying to understand what their problem might be, where they fit in the scheme of things, and ultimately what the problem you're going to be there to solve is. Let me move on to the hiring manager for just a moment. The hiring manager has a problem, which is sometimes their team is overworked. Sometimes things are blowing up. Sometimes the hiring manager is under a massive amount of pressure. Sometimes they have very little budget. Sometimes, there's all kinds of things that the hiring manager has. It's a problem. So they clearly have a set of tasks that they need someone to perform. And that set of tasks is going to achieve something, right? It's going to achieve some result inside of the company. But not only that, sometimes they can't sleep at night. Sometimes they're really stressed out. So the idea is that the problem goes far beyond just the work that you do and the results of the work that you do. The problem is the hiring manager has a team to build. They've got a boss to satisfy. They've got all kinds of things going on. So when you're talking to the hiring manager or someone who's on the team, the problem isn't just the work that you're going to do. The problem is helping them be more successful in their career and everyone you're talking to. So I'm not, I don't mean to spend too much time on this, but the point is that if you go into the interview with the point of view that, one, you're not just there to get a job, but more importantly, you're there to help a fellow human being solve a problem that they have. And you're ultimately there to help the hiring manager solve a problem that they have and to become more successful in their career. You're there to help your peers be more successful in what they're doing. And ultimately, you're there to help the company solve a problem that they have. Things will go so much better. I can feel it in an interview when somebody's in it and it's all just for them. It's all about them, right? It's like, okay, that doesn't necessarily mean I move someone forward, but the people who are there to really solve a problem, to help other people, that's when things go really well for you. All right. So we're going to move on. Just remember, it's always about the problem. It's never about you. And that can take some of the pressure off, and you're there to help other people go into the interview to see whether or not you can help them. When you're in an interview, and this is this item right here, 5 underlying interview questions. When you're in an interview, just recognize that the person who's in that interview, they're underneath it all. They probably don't recognize this. This isn't something people think about it, but I'm just this guy who's been doing this for a long time, and I'm curious, and I look into it. And I think what it comes down to is there are really 5 questions that are kind of being asked when you're in an interview, which is, who are you? What problems can you solve, right? What do you do? What work can you do? What problems can you solve? How skilled are you at it, right? Can you help me in my business? And that's one that people miss a whole lot, which is, oh, okay, cool. So let's say you're in IT. I need to understand that you can do the IT work that I need you to do. If you're in project management, I need to understand that you know project management, that you know Gantt charts, that you know the critical paths, that you understand the ability to do the work. If you're in business administration, I need to know that you can do that. But more importantly is, do you understand how you can help me in my business? And rarely does someone in an interview setting really understand that or talk about that too much, which is, just give you an example in IT. If you're, say, in early stage entry level IT and you're moving into, say, help desk roles and things like that, the problem is not really to image new computers. The problem isn't really to all of the tasks that you're going to do. That's not really the problem. The real problem is keeping users productive, making sure that people are very happy with the services that they've got, to ensure that, you know, company assets are protected and that things are taken care of the way that they're supposed to be taken. I mean, that's the real problem that's going on. And I don't care what level you're at, just consider the fact that the tasks that you perform and the responsibilities that you have, when I say, can you help me in my business, what we're talking about is, as a result of doing what you do, what is better? Who is impacted? How does it make a difference in the lives of customers or other people who you work with? And that's what I mean. And so if you understand that underneath it all, someone wants to know, who are you? What can you do? And oh, by the way, do you understand the impact that your work has? Do you understand how you're really helping our business? Less than 80% of the people who I interview do a very good job of connecting the work that they do to the results that they create. And the people who do clearly stand out, because that's the real problem that you're there to solve. You're not really, nobody wants to hire you to image laptops, right? They don't. If that could happen automatically, don't ever do that. What they really want is happy users. They want productive workforce. They want company assets protected. They want to make sure that their money going into IT, and I'm sticking with IT for right now, is really worthwhile. All right. So who are you? What problems can you solve? Can you help me in my business? This is a big one, right? Do you have proof? Do you have proof? Can you make me feel comfortable that you can actually do these things? If you're in career transition into something new, this is where certifications really stand out. And I don't know if anyone's ever really talked to you about it, but what certifications do is they reduce risk for the organization who's hiring you. Because the truth is that if I'm bringing you in, and specifically if you're in a career transition situation where you don't have a lot of expertise in what you've done, you haven't done it a whole lot, a certification will provide a form of proof that says that you actually do know what you're doing. You will be able to perform the functions of the job. So who are you? What problems do you solve? Can you help me in my business? Do you have proof? And is it worth considering you further? Because every single step along the way, as a recruiter, my job is to really evaluate, is it worth the time of whoever's next to consider you? Is it worth the time for that team to really spend having conversations and the rest with you? And that's ultimately what I have to figure out. And then, or that's the problem that I've got, right? And then ultimately it comes down to, do we want to extend you an offer? And do you want, you know, at some point the question is, do we want to extend an offer? And do we want you to be part of our team? So I believe that those are the 5 underlying interview questions. And if you go into your interview understanding that you're there to really discover with another person whether or not you're going to be able to, motivated to, and excited about helping them solve their problems, which include the tasks you perform, the responsibilities you have, the results of those kinds of things, who else you help in the organization, the impact on the business. Those, if you go into it with that notion, that kind of a mindset, and you leave behind that ultimately you're trying to get a job, right? Things will go so much better, right? Karen, does that make sense? Are we good? I don't want to belabor that too
Yes.
much, but I think that's I think this is the core of it, right? And I have far too many interviews where the evidence is people are asking me, well, what's the job pay and what are benefits like, and you know, why is this job open, and you know, what is it about me that, you know, is there anything about me that gives you concern and stuff like that? It's just like, you know, none of those things are questions or comments that you have that make me feel confident that you're qualified, interested, and you're focused on solving the problem and helping our team. So if you go into an interview with not only questions, but the point of view that you're there to get something for yourself called a job, it just won't go as well for you if you're there to really discover whether or not you're the person who can really help those people and help that company achieve its goals. All right. So your objective in an interview, and I won't belabor this stuff anymore, but this stuff I think is critically important. Too few people have that feeling when I'm talking to them. And even if the other person doesn't really recognize it and they're not looking for it, I mean, I'm looking for it because that's what I do professionally. But even if they don't, things will go better. It will feel better to them. So the objectives in your interview really are to connect with the other person. I mean, connect with them. See if they can't have a feeling that you really do care and that you're there to help them, right? You're there to help them solve their problem. See if you can't shift the conversation or really to have a discussion about the problem and how to solve it. And your goal in every single interview is essentially to get to the next step, which is another thing that I see going wrong very often in interviews is somebody's thinking about it all the way from the perspective of what the job's going to be. And they're asking questions about the job and they're what have you. And so, you know what, we got a lot of steps between here and there. So every single interview, the goal is to get to the next step, get to the next step, get to the next step. And if it turns out that it's not a job or a team or a company or a product that you're ultimately interested in, the goal of interviewing is that if things don't move forward and you don't get an offer, the goal is that it's because you chose to decline the offer or you chose to withdraw from the interview process, not that they did. Because as a recruiter, that's my take every single time, which is we need to engage people in such a way that if they withdraw themselves from the interview process or they decline the offer, right? I just lost control of the deal. So both sides of the equation, you as the candidate need to be going into this with the idea that, you know, I mean, I'm going to get to the next step every single time. And if I don't, it's got to feel a little bit like, because even if you weren't interested in the job, make sure that it's you who makes the decision, not them, right? Okay, cool. So let's talk about how to make that happen. And I think that it's really all in the preparation. And I'll tell you again that I'd say, in fact, I'll go further. I'll say less than 2% of all the people who I talk to are even remotely prepared for the interview. And the way that I know that is as the recruiter in the situation, I'm always far more prepared for the interview than the candidates who I talk to are. It's shocking to me. I mean, I'll go over their background. I know who they are. I'll open up the companies where they've been. I understand where they went to school. I've already got an idea of their pattern and what they're doing. I mean, it's shocking to me. So I think that, and I'll always just this morning, you know, I had an interview just this morning, and the way to open up every single interview, and this is just my way, but you'll commonly be asked this. You know, I introduce myself, and then I say, you know, I tell you what, Karen. You know, I don't expect you to know a whole lot about our company, and this is not really a test, but I'm just curious. Tell me what you know about our organization and what you can imagine this role might really be about. And then I'll take it from there. I'll fill in all the details, right? But I don't expect you to know too much. So just tell me, you know, what is it? Tell me a little bit about what you understand. And the answer generally is, well, I don't really know a whole lot. Okay. The truth is it is a test, right? And the truth is I do understand. And the thing is that I don't hold it against people because 98% of people really don't have a very good answer for it. But the 2% who do, it really helps a whole lot. So I think that you probably know that you need to prepare for your interview if you're like most people, but you maybe don't know how to do it. So let me show you. Let me teach you how to do it. So if it were me going into an interview, this is exactly what I would do. And the reason why I know this is because if I'm in sales mode, I run a small company. If I'm in sales mode and I'm going to go try to close a new deal, this is exactly what I do to go discover things about the company. Or if I am being introduced to a new hiring manager inside of an existing client, this is exactly what I go do to discover their background, their approach to things. And so let me just show you. So step number one is to understand the company. And I really believe that it's your job and it's your responsibility to have a pretty deep understanding of what that organization does, who they serve, probably how they make their money. And in fact, if you do your job well and you have the opportunity to share it, the experience that someone ought to have and what you ought to hear sometimes from the people who are interviewing is, wow, you know, I mean, heck, you said that better than I could. And the truth is, it doesn't take all that much work to do it. So let me show you how to do it. So I think that, you know, if someone's going to ask you, you know, the question, what do you know about our company? I think that you need to have a 1 to 2 minute answer for that. 1 to 2 minutes. I mean, I would. And the way that I go about it when I'm meeting a new client or being introduced to a new hiring manager, what have you, is I literally write about a 1-page company summary. I will do it on a piece of paper, but you could certainly type it up, but I think it's not just a copy and paste, right? I mean, it's the work so that you can actually internalize it. And here's the outline that I use, right? This first statement is simply one of a pretty high level statement of who the company is and what they do. So, and this is a make-believe company, but Retail Online Solutions help small to medium online retailers drive targeted traffic to their client's website and convert their traffic into sales. If I was to break this down into pieces, it's name of the company, helps, what type of client, achieve what, right? So retail online companies, small to medium online retailers, drive targeted traffic and convert the traffic to sales. That's what they do, right? Next step here, right, which is their products and services include, and if they don't have services, it's just their products or it's just their services, but their products and services include this list of stuff, right? And it's a short list of stuff. The next statement is, and literally you can use this as a paint by numbers way of doing that. I would be so impressed if somebody, if I was doing recruiting for Retail Online Solutions and I said, so tell me a little bit about what you know about Retail Online Solutions. If you went through this, you'll be the only person who does this, the only one. Their products and services include everything from this, that, and the other, right? The next statement is a key differentiator. A key differentiator. What makes them different from their competitors, right? How are you going to pull that out, right? Here's a key differentiator. Ideal clients are, right? Sometimes you can gather this, or example clients include, right? And where you can, we can start doing things like, and this is the part that's the easiest part, and you ought to be able to do at rote. Some of these other things begin to be a little bit optional, but let me show you, and I'm going to show you how to do this. It's easier than maybe anything. People describe the company culture as, right, location and size, headquartered in Austin, staff of over 30. I'll always go gather this information, right? Anything that I can in terms of current events, anything that I can in terms of the history of the company, and anything that I can in terms of the leadership or mergers or acquisitions or whatever's going on. And it doesn't take that long, and you will be the only person in the interview process who does this. So let me show you how to do it. So what I'm going to do, are we all good, Karen? We all good? Questions, comments?
All right. Yes, Gary, we are all good. Okay. There is a question for you when you get to it, but there's a rush.
Okay, cool.
Before the end. Thank you.
All right, cool. And I'm going to start moving through this stuff a little bit more quickly, because I think maybe you're kind of getting the point, which is an interview is not about you. An interview is about your ability to solve problems. The questions that people have in their mind is, who are you? What can you do? Do you understand how what you do makes an impact? Do you have proof that you can do it? And why should I consider you further? And I think that your preparation answers, a lot of it is going to be, why should I consider you further? Because you're the one and only person who bothered to do their homework, who knows anything about us. And that's going to show a notion of motivation, of drive. And the flat out truth is, I just like it better when somebody knows that. I mean, it makes me feel confident that they're going to be able. When I have someone who's properly prepared for their interview, if they prepared for the interview, my belief is they're going to prepare for everything. And that might not be true at all. But if they're unprepared, my belief is they're unprepared for anything that they do. How in the world could somebody be unprepared for something as important as an interview? Are you kidding me? This is a life-changing event we're starting to talk about. We're talking about taking a job. I think it's a really big deal. I think it's game changing. I think it's life changing. All right. So let's talk about how to go gather this information. So the easiest way to gather this information is to go to LinkedIn. And you might know that just about every company of any significance has a LinkedIn page. So I'm just going to pick Revionics as an example. So I'm going to click on Revionics' page. And the reason why I like using LinkedIn is this is a one-stop shop for almost all the information that I need. They give companies a very constrained amount of space, so you can't have a marketing person who puts all kind of marketing fluff on their site and the rest. And it's a good place to start to see if you can't get the information that you need. In particular, what I'll do is right here, right? I click this About section. And the reason why I know this so well is that if you were a candidate and I was going to interview you, I'm going over your LinkedIn profile with a fine-tooth comb. I'm opening up every employer that you worked for, and I'm likely to understand as much or more about some of those employers than you will by the time we have an interview. Just saying. So here we go. Revionics is a global SaaS provider of science-based pricing, promotion, and competitive insights for innovative retailers. All right, there it is. There's your first sentence. They just gave it to you. I haven't been here before on this one, by the way. Oh, look at this. It looks like they use my template. Revionics helps retailers around the world gain competitive edge by managing, optimizing prices, promotions, and markdowns. Cool. Created by retail experts, Revionics cloud-based SaaS solution delivers amazing year-over-year return on investment with attractive total cost of ownership. I'm not sure how much of this is going to tell me, but there you go. You got a big start right here, right? Here's other things that I know. They have 200 to 500 employees. I'll show you how to narrow that down. Actually, there are 175 that are on LinkedIn. And what you know when somebody says there's 175 people listed on LinkedIn is rarely is every single employee there. So if I saw 175, I'd say they're probably about 200. And the truth is, I think it's like 203, right? It's about 203. I know this company pretty well. But now you know how many employees, where their headquarters are. They're privately held when they were founded in 2012, right? Or 2002. You can see that they have people in Austin, Texas. They have people who are out in Roseville, California. You can see that they've got employees in London, and you see they can have employees in Dusseldorf as well as in Melbourne, right? So you just figured out a lot, right? Now, the other thing you can do is if the job you're interviewing for is in Austin, Texas, right? I can actually go here. I can see where they're at in Austin, Texas. Hey, you guys are right over by the river. I've noticed your business lots of times, right? There they are, they're right by the river. Now what I can do is I can go see their people. And when I click on that, and this is not an upgraded account, by the way. This is the exact same account that that you've got. I do have an upgraded account, but I'm not using it right now. Here's where they live. This is where they've studied inside of school. And if I want to see them, I can click right here. See all 175 employees that are on LinkedIn, and I can begin to go down this list, right? Now, if I happen to know that I'm interviewing with, I'll just pick one, Morali. If I'm interviewing with Morali, right, I'm going to go ahead and go here. And I'm going to review Morali's background. I'll get to that in a minute. But there's Morali. I could go and see probably who else is likely to be on Morali's team. If I was interviewing with him and say, hey, it looks like so-and-so and so-and-so might be on your team. I did a little bit of homework on LinkedIn. In 15 minutes, I can know so much. And one in 200, 1 in 300 people who I talk to ever bother to get this level of information, right? You can clearly go to their website. And here's one other thing I want to show you, though, is that another great place to get information is right here. Oh, I didn't mean to go to revionics.com. Well, you can while I'm here. A lot of websites are all crazy and they got you can spend way too much time on this, right? You really can. But if they have a place where they have a blog or a knowledge center or something like that, that's an often good place to go get some current events, right? So let's just go check out Revionics blog real quick. Let's see what they got. Tales from COVID, right? Tales from COVID. And just jumps off the map at me right off the bat, but I would certainly go look out that. But what I would also do is Revionics. I'm going to do this as a Google search. And then what I'm going to do right up here at the top is I'm going to say that I want, oh, here it is, news about Revionics. So here's one. Optos completes acquisition of Revionics. Hey, if you were interviewing with Revionics, you would be one of the only people who were. I just read that you guys recently, see, I was posted 9 hours ago. Yeah, I saw that you guys were recently acquired by Optos. Congratulations, right? So my point in all of this is that when you're going into an interview, you really ought to know the company, right? And I think you ought to know it this well, at least these first couple of lines. And then why not dive in further? Why not know the company, right? One thing that I will caution you on in terms of knowing the company is Glassdoor. And the only reason why I want to pull out Glassdoor is that way too often have people say, hey, I read this negative review on Glassdoor. And it's just like, you know what? Here's my caution with regard to Glassdoor. You may or may not know that that companies can't change their profile on Glassdoor. They can't reply to anything that was posted there. They can't do anything for less than about $6,000 a year. So most companies don't do that. And so sometimes I'll actually post old information about them. There are companies that I know of whose marketing person gets bonuses for how good their reviews are, and they outsource that to India. I know companies that have horrible reviews because they had people who are basically committing felonies in terms of stealing their intellectual property, and those people essentially posted bad reviews. And what I can tell you is, in my personal experience, the reviews and the information on Glassdoor does not often reflect what's really going on. So be really careful, right? If you're going to go look at it, take information you get on Glassdoor with the most massive grain of salt that you have ever considered, ever given anything. So anyway, so there's that. All right, so that's what I do in terms of preparing for my interview, in terms of knowing the company. Step number 2, and we'll move through some of this other stuff a little bit faster. Number 2 is define the problem. It's super rare that I have anybody who does what I'm talking about here, which is, if there's an open position and you're being interviewed, that means that there must be a problem that needs to be solved. And, I think that you should define the likely problems and be prepared to address them. So as an example, what I do when I'm talking to a new hiring manager, even if it's an existing client, I mean, and I'll show you in a minute how to find information on the person, but the idea is, see the scope of their team, look at who's on their team, think about what they do as a business, look at what their customers are and what their customer base is, and now imagine what is likely happening in those roles, right? So as an example, if you're in business administration, I think about, what does it say? About 30% of you are, about 5 of you are. If you're a business administration professional and you're going in and you're interviewing for, say, an executive assistant type role, it's super easy to go look at that company and go see who the executives are who work in that, who are with that business. Go see how many VPs there are. Go see how many, how big that team is, so that you're beginning to say, all right, so I may be supporting as many as this many different VPs. Look at the business that they're in. They're in the retail technology business, like Revionics. You can kind of say, all right, if I'm working with these executives, I'm maybe also helping them schedule meetings with other retail executives. I maybe, like, imagine what's going on inside of that company. Know that they're a technology company. They probably have a software development team. They've got an HR team. So you can begin to envision what it is that it might be like to be an administrative assistant or an executive assistant inside of a software as a service company that serves multi-billion-dollar global retailers, right? Can you imagine what a role like that is and what kind of professionals you're working with? Okay, cool. Set that aside and imagine that you're doing business administration inside of a pharmaceutical company, and that pharmaceutical company has a lot of doctors and researchers and the rest. And you can imagine that what you might be doing has to do with maybe very high levels of detail in helping submit government forms, and maybe helping them with some of the details on making sure that all the paperwork is done and that they hit all the deadlines that they have to have. It may be super deadline driven, right? And even if it's not, the fact that you went to the trouble to go think about those kinds of things and could discuss that in an interview is going to make somebody go, hey, you're actually really paying attention, because the job description is not going to say that. The job description is going to say, set up meetings and help with paperwork and do those kinds of things. And you take that in terms of the task you have to perform, put it in the context of the company, and to begin to define what the problem really is. If you're in IT, and let's just say you're going in as, say, a system administrator and network engineer, and the company that you're going to interview with is an automobile dealership. In fact, it's a company that owns 6 automobile dealerships. They own a Volvo dealership. They own multiple dealerships in multiple cities. Okay, now you can begin to imagine some things. What's happening in IT? They probably have different service platforms from the different manufacturers. You probably have different part systems. They have salespeople who have bring your own devices, right, that you're probably going to have to support. You can see how many people are in their IT department. You can see how much turnover they have. You can begin to imagine what life might be as a IT professional inside of that company. All right, let's say you're an IT professional, you're going and you're interviewing with a law firm. Very different. So my point is that if you know the company and now you can begin to find the problem, you're in the interview to have a discussion with them to see whether or not you're the person who can best help define, best help solve the problem. So if you think ahead of time what the likely problems are, then you'll be so much further ahead of the game. No one does this, by the way. I shouldn't say no one. It's very rare that anyone does this. So lots of places to get the information, but the best way to do it is to investigate the company, look at the job description, and imagine what it might be to perform that job inside of that company. They're a manufacturing company, they're a distributor company, they're a distillation company, they're a hospital, they're a clinic, right? I mean, just go imagine what that job might be like, and things will go so much better for you. Final thing I want to point out right here is that before you go into an interview and you're defining the problem, I mean, ask your recruiter, ask whoever's setting up the appointment with you. Look on Google to see about old job descriptions, review the LinkedIn profiles of people who are currently in the job, and just conceptualize the possibility of what it's like. And you can also prepare questions to help identify the problem early in the interview, because what I'd love for you to do, and when your interview is going to go really well, is if during the course of the interview, it stops from a question and answer about you and shifts to a conversation about solving the problem, things went really, really well. All right, cool. Let's talk about a couple of other things. We'll take another quick break and I'll see about questions. So now we know the company. Now we can imagine what the problem is, right? Imagine what the problem is. Next thing is to know the interviewer, right? Ask who the interviewer is going to be. Know who the interviewer is going to be. And what you can do is, know where they went to school. Know, if you can, find out what kind of interview questions they ask. Find out if they're a person who likes lots of stories. Find out whether or not they're direct and they're to the point. Find out how busy they are, right? And the way you can find that information is whoever's setting up the interview, ask them. Ask people in your network. Go to LinkedIn, see if anybody's connected with them. See whether or not anyone you know might happen to know that individual. There's all kinds of ways to do it. And what I suggest you do is use LinkedIn to really dive into who the person who you're interviewing really, who they really are. As an example, I brought up Murali earlier, right? So let's just go check out Murali. And here's how fast you can learn things about Murali. Let's say that you're interviewing with Murali, Director of Engineering, Platform, and Science Development at Revionics. All right. Director of Engineering, Data Platform, and Science. All right. And regardless of whether or not you're interviewing for an administrative assistant position with Murali or a technical position with Murali, you just know a bunch of things now. You know what Revionics does. It's complex pricing analytics for multi-billion-dollar global retailers, right? We found that out a while ago. So it's complex stuff. Platform is the back office stuff. Science, right? As well as engineering. And now when you look at his background, right, we aren't going to dive way into it, but he's been chief technology officer, he's been director of application development, those kinds of things. And if you look at the places where he's been, he was a business architect at Capital One, a big bank. He knows a lot about finance. You'd find out about that is about finance. He has a lot of background in finance, actually, if we peel this back, finance and banking specifically. And if you dive into it and you look at it, what you'd find out was that he was responsible, I don't know Murali, but he was responsible for all the back-end banking systems for very large banks and the rest, right? So you just learned a lot about Murali. And in the interview, if I was interviewing with Murali early on, I'd say, hey, Murali, I looked at your profile on LinkedIn. Wow, you've done some really interesting, impressive things. I mean, you've been some very large banks. I mean, financial transaction, massive volume of transactions. Wow, I'm impressed. And regardless of whether I was interviewing for a business or administrative assistant type role or a technical role or what have you, all I can tell you is that when Murali recognizes that I went and did my homework, it's going to go better. I can tell you that despite the fact that everybody always knows who they're interviewing when they interview with me, I rarely have anybody who bothers to look at my background, and it makes a really big difference. It really does. All right. It just
Hey,
gives me
Gary,
the yeah.
will you do us a favor and turn off your video for a minute and then turn it back on, and maybe you'll not be frozen anymore.
Okay. Let's see.
It's a pretty good frozen face, actually, but it's always better when we can see you
Well,
moving around.
My only choice right here now, though, when I click on this thing, it says Zoom meetings is not responding. I can close the program or wait for the program to
Oh,
respond. So I think I'm going to be frozen or I'm going to be gone. Oh, now it changed. Hang on. Am I
okay.
unfrozen?
Not yet.
Maybe. It's not letting me turn it off. My only choice would be to bail out and come back.
Oh, no, it's okay.
Okay, cool.
We'll be okay with that.
Okay,
It's
cool.
a pretty good frozen.
Okay, good. That's too bad. All right, cool. So really go understand the person. So now we know the company. Now we know the problem. Now we know who we're talking to, and we can put everything about, put that person in the context of the company, put the person in the context of the problem that they have to solve. You know that you're interviewing with Morale. It's for a business administration function. This person has a team of engineers and scientists around them. He's also at a, executive level. Who are his peers? You could probably easily find out who are the people he likely works with. Would you be supporting those other kinds of people? What would you be supporting them to do? Right? I mean, there's all kinds of things you can begin to figure out by this combination of know the company, know the problem that you're there to solve, understand the job description, the task. As a result of those tasks, who are you impacting? You're impacting Morale, the other people around him, the people who are on his team, and potentially the customers that they have, right? So you now know a lot, right? That's a lot. When's the last time you knew all those things going into an interview? If you've known those things going into an interview, you're really rare, right? Really rare. It almost never happens. Piece number 4 is, I call it your talent brand summary, but it's really just know yourself, right? And the point is that you really need to be able to do a great job of answering the question. So tell me about yourself. Rarely does anybody do a good job on this one. So I'm going to shift gears just a little bit and talk about how to answer this one. I'll give you the 2 most common answers because I essentially ask this in every single interview that I'm in. It's like, I'd love to hear your story. Tell me about your story. And what people will tell me is, well, as a project manager over at XYZ company, and, I kept project on project and schedule and budget on budget and, project and made sure that projects got done well on time. And before that, as a project manager over at ABC company, and I did, made sure that budget was on budget and, time was on time and schedule was on schedule and the quality was what it's supposed to be. And what they do is they move backward in time, giving me a job title and a list of responsibilities they had in the job. Not only is that really, really boring, but if you were a project manager, I know what you did. I do. I know what you did. And listing a list of things that you did makes you just like everybody else, because everyone who ever did the same job that you did a lot of the same tasks as you. And what I know is that 20% of the time you did, I'm going to go to Pareto's rule, right? 20% of the time you did an outstanding job. 20% of the time you did a lousy job. And, 60% of the time you're somewhere in the middle. So as soon as you tell me on your resume, on your LinkedIn profile, and specifically in an interview, when you tell me about yourself, and what you tell me is you label yourself with a job title and you list your task and responsibility, what you just told me is you're just like everybody else, which means you're average at best, right? You just became really average at best. And the problem that I've got as a recruiter in particular is that everybody blends together. Everybody blends together. They're all the same. I mean, I've conducted 40 interviews this week, probably, maybe not that many, 30, for only 2 roles. And they're kind of all the same except for 2. Only 2 people stand out to me. I could tell you 2 people's names. I could tell you about them. And that's because they really stood out in some way. And so here's the thing. To really stand out, what you have to be able to do is to talk about results, talk about the problems that you solve, whatever task and responsibilities you have. Tell me about the things that are as a result of doing those tasks, as a result of having those responsibilities. What happened? What's better? And the only real choices are, did you make money or save money? Did you save time? Did you improve quality? Which is things like customer service, quality customer results, customer satisfaction, improvements in the productivity. I mean, what happened? What was better? And that's the stuff that you need to be able to talk to me about. And so I've got this little framework here for that. It's kind of this paint by numbers outline. And the truth is, the way that I came up with this paint by numbers outline is that my job as a professional recruiter is to teach my team, who are other professional recruiters, how to present professionals, how to present people to hiring managers and teams in a way that in 15 to 20 seconds, I can create this compelling story that is going to really engage those people and understand and go, oh, okay, I got it. And they're looking forward to talking to them. And it goes something like this: I am a blank and a blank, right? And what you do is you fill these things in. You could start with titles, but my suggestion is that when you do this, that, and by the way, in the resumes at Rock class, we go into this in detail. But I'm a blank and a blank. You could certainly fill in titles, but here's the problem with titles is that if I said I'm a director of recruiting, now what happens is they're needing to hire an individual contributor. I just shot myself in the foot because I just told them I'm a director of recruiting, and they're going to go, we're not looking for a director. But what I can say is I'm a recruiting professional. I'm a recruiting leader. I'm a recruiting expert, right? I could say all of those things, and they don't imply hierarchy, right? It does imply competence. So my suggestion to you is whatever you're putting in those things, you try not to imply hierarchy, because as soon as I tell you that I'm a recruiting professional or a recruiting expert or a technical recruit, like whatever it is, I'm an executive recruiter. I just painted a picture in your mind, but I want to paint a picture in your mind so that I now become the person who you want me to become. And if you're not hiring a manager, as soon as I told you I'm a director of recruiting, you just excluded me, right? That fast. So I'm a blank and a blank. So for me, I'm a recruiting leader and a, corporate hiring consultant, as an example, right? You don't have to use two, but I think it often works really well. I'm a software engineer and a data engineering expert. I'm a certified IT administrator and an IT security specialist. I'm a business administrator and a office manager, right? It's this kind of thing, kind of saying, the idea is that to begin to paint a picture, because somebody's saying, who are you and what do you do? Well, as soon as you paint those things, they get an idea of what it is you want to do. And when you don't include notions of hierarchy, to be the person who they want you to be. If you happen to be interviewing for a job that's called data architect, one of the things you probably say is data architect. I'm a data architect. Whatever they listed the job title to be that, right? And the truth is, if you're not qualified to be a data architect, don't label yourself as one, because you need to be one. But surely that goes without saying. But I have people all the time interviewing for jobs they're just totally not qualified for. All right. I'm a blank and a blank. I help these kinds of people, these kinds of companies, right? I help small to medium technology companies. I help busy sales executives. And the point is, you want someone to see that you help them, essentially, right? I help busy, technical leaders, technology leaders. I help executives inside of companies. I help, the managers of clinics, whoever it is that you help, and you put that in the context. Solve problems such as this. Now, when you're putting together a list of the problems that you solve, think about it, and it's always the list of problems that you solve are always a step above the task and the responsibilities that you have. So if you're interviewing for an entry-level IT job and it's on a help desk kind of thing, then I help busy IT departments, or whatever department you're in, ensure that users are productive, that our user feedback is really positive, and that every single time that we clear out the tickets, that we take care of things, and our user base is really happy. That's the problems that I solve. And then there's this last statement, which is using skills that include this, that, and the other. And so the idea is that this answers the questions. Who are you? Well, I am a blank and a blank. Well, what do you do? Well, I solve problems like this using skills like that. Do you understand anything about my business? Yeah, I do, right? I help companies and businesses like yours solve these kinds of problems. And this little outline is a really good way of shaping the answer to the question. So know the company, know the problem, know the interviewer, and know how you're going to present yourself in the context of that particular business, with that particular interviewer, for that particular job, solving those kinds of problems. It is not a generic answer. When somebody asks you, so tell me about yourself, there's a missing part there. Tell me about yourself with regard to your ability to be successful in our company, solving the problems that I need you to solve, working with me and my team, right? That's really the question. And so all the stuff that you might say about yourself otherwise, especially the stuff in the past. So if you're in career transition and somebody says, well, tell me about yourself, and you say, well, I joined the Army when I first got out of high school, and I did these kinds of things and all that. And, I was a nurse and I was an MP and all that. And now I'm transitioning into IT and the rest. There's nothing about going down that whole list of things that is going to be all that helpful, right? I'm not necessarily saying that those are bad things. Those are true things. But anytime you're in a situation where somebody's essentially giving you the opportunity to, so tell me a little bit about yourself kind of thing, my suggestion to you is that you ground it in today and you project a picture into the future and what you've done in the past and all those kinds of things don't help in that particular moment. We'll get to that, right? Somebody will get to that in the interview, but the way to ace your interview is to project yourself as being successful in the future. Because the truth of the matter is that that's why you get hired. Nobody hires you for your past. They hire you for their ability and the image that they create in their mind of your success in the future. And if you tell me all about being a nurse and you're transitioning in IT, it's easy for my reaction to be, oh, wow, that's really great. Good luck with that. When you become an actual IT professional, let me know, right? Because that sounds cool to me. So, okay, next, right? It kind of happens that fast. And nobody's trying to be mean or trying to be ugly. But my job in this setting is to tell you how to ace your interview. And the answer is know the company, know the problem, know the interviewer, right? And understand how you're going to present yourself in the context of all of those kinds of things. And what you want to do is you want to tell the truth, you want to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, but not necessarily your whole truth. For all of us, most of our whole truth is irrelevant. Most of our whole truth is irrelevant to any particular job or what have you. All right. All right. So finally, final thing I've got to tell you is all about, how to, a little bit about how to respond to likely questions. But before we do that, I want to take a quick breather here and see how we're doing. I hope this stuff is helpful to you guys. And what I'm trying to do is share with you the experience that I have had thousands and thousands and thousands of times. What I hear feedback from managers and people who interview, from other interviewers all the time, my clients, when I hear back. And the things that I'm telling you are really the things that are going to set you apart, because most of the time going into an interview, somebody goes into an interview, they think that their job is to sit there and respond to questions. They weren't really prepared. They don't know the company. They don't know the interviewer. They haven't thought about what the problem is. And they do a really bad job of, when somebody says, so tell me your story, they go backward in time and they tell a whole bunch of history. And a lot of times the whole bunch of history that they tell is not all that related to the job. And you just became boring and you just moved on my list to call, man, there's going to be somebody better, right? So I think it's critical. But before we jump into this thing about likely questions, what do you think, Karen? We got questions, we got comments, we got anything that we need to talk about?
Yes, we've been getting comments. People do find this very helpful. So
Okay,
thank you
good.
so much for sharing what you are.
It's all good. It's important to me that it makes sense to people.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are a couple of questions
Okay,
here.
cool.
So somebody's asking about, I'm terribly horrible at interviews. Is it okay to be transparent and let the interviewer know that?
You know what? So terribly horrible, very bad day. How's that go? Or something terrible, horrible, very bad day. Anyway, so the answer, of course, is yes. And the other thing I want to tell you about that is that people don't expect you to not be nervous. People don't, I have never, ever, ever had anyone who rejected a candidate because they were nervous, or that people expect you to be. And the other thing I want to make crystal clear is that you don't have to change who you are. You don't have to be outgoing. You don't have to be charming. You don't have to be anything other than exactly who you are. And it's even okay at the beginning of the interview when there's some small talk going on and the rest to say, this is really important to me. I'm here to, if it were me going into an interview, and let's just say I'm a little bit nervous about it and I'm not really confident about my ability to interview, I literally might say at some point, hey, Karen, I'm really glad to be here today. It's important to me that I am able to, tell you all the things that matter to you with respect. I'm here to see if I can help you solve the problems that are important to you and your team and the rest. And I got to tell you, I'm a little bit nervous. This is important to me. If you want to take notes, say, would it be all right to take, I mean, it's really okay, right? I mean, just go ahead and do that introduction and go into this meeting, go into this interview with the idea that you're there to see if you can help that other person. And when you express that, you will absolutely set yourself apart, because most people are in the interview trying to get a job. Most people are taking, right? Most people are taking. And the truth is, needy isn't pretty. And if you come across as needy, that's not pretty. Now, I do know that that's hard to do. If you're worried about paying your bill, you're worried about paying your mortgage, you're worried that your car is going, I mean, if it's really important to you and you really need income, I get it, that it's difficult to set that aside. But the truth is, just be yourself. It's really okay if you're not great at interviewing, because your job won't be to interview. Your job is to solve those problems. So feel free to be yourself, and feel free to introduce yourself, and feel free to tell them that you're a little bit nervous, and be free to express to Karen, I'm so, I'm really grateful for your time. The thing that's most important to me in our conversation is that I want to be able to do a good job in showing and discussing with you whether or not I'm going to be the right person to solve the problems that you have and help you and your team be successful. Right. I mean, use that as a quote if you would like to. I'm here to see if I can't be, if I can't successfully help you with the problems, and to help you and your team, and this business be more successful because of the work that I do. That's what I'm here to do. Right. It's important to me. So put that on the table. It's all good. You don't have to be anything other than yourself. I don't know if I answered that question or not, but that was the reaction that I had.
Yes, no, that was a perfect answer, Gary.
Okay,
Thank you.
cool.
There's a few other questions. Would you like to keep going with this, or should I
No,
get
this is
to this?
good. Other questions would be awesome. I
Okay,
think people are
great.
probably tired of hearing me talk.
No, I think they're happy to hear your answers.
Okay.
This one is a little bit of a situation when you have somebody who is transitioning
Mm-hmm.
to a different field related. So, like this person was involved with computers in a different kind of way, and now
Yeah.
they're moving into more of an IT generalist type
Mm-hmm.
role.
Yeah.
And so, how much do they reference the stuff that they did before? With
Sure.
yeah, talk
Yeah.
about that a
Okay,
little.
cool. So here's what I believe about referencing stuff in the past, just in general. Let's talk about that first. And so the way I think that you frame all of your conversation, and your resume is a conversation, by the way, your emails, your cover letters, every bit of communication that you're talking about, which is, there's just a couple of steps to it. One is, be very, very clear on the direction that you're going. And it sounds like you are, right? If you're transitioning IT and you're transitioning these kind of roles and into business administration or IT, whether you're experienced or entry level or project management, you now have a clear path forward, which is awesome. Lots of people don't. If you know some people who are looking for jobs and are open to possibilities, by the way, please get them to be not open to possibilities, especially today, because in the scheme of all this, so I won't belabor that, but be very clear on where it is you're going. Step number two is to be able to craft a story about yourself that's about the future. I am so if you're moving into an IT role, and I'm just going to assume it's IT administration, IT security, those kinds of things. I am a certified IT administrator and an IT security specialist. I help these kinds of companies solve these kinds of problems, including, protecting company assets, ensuring that, users and systems are productive, being mindful of budget so that we're making a business impact. And I do that through these kinds of things, right? So first step is be very clear on where you're going and what it is that you can do to be successful in that role. Now, what you do with regard to your past is that there are a lot of people who do all of these functions in terms of business administration and IT and project manager. There are a lot of them. Imagine in your own mind, imagine 10 people who do what you do. There's 10 other people, right? And what you know is that one or two of them really stand out from the others. And rarely do they stand out because they're better at doing the work. I'm not talking about people who are doing better at the work. I'm saying 10 people who are equivalently good at doing the work, performing the tasks, right? What is it that's going to make those other two or three really stand out from the pack? What's going to make the difference? And when I talk to hiring managers all the time, it's amazing to me when I say, all right, great. Have you got people on your team who you'd love to hire more people exactly like them? And they're like, usually the answer is yeah. kind of going, okay, cool. What is it about Sally that really makes Sally stand out? What they always tell me is it's never about their ability to do the work or their technical skills or their competency. It's always about they do what it takes to get the job done, right? You know, everybody likes working with them. There's a whole list of things. So my point is that if you imagine a group of people who do the same thing that you do, they're all equivalently good at it, and a couple of them stand out. What is it that makes them stand out? And so, like in IT, since that's the space we're talking about, is attention to detail, ensuring that the problem gets solved the first time, not spending too much money where it's unnecessary, right? Vigilance with regard to protecting company assets, right? I mean, those are the things that are going to really make them stand out. And none of those were about IT skills, right? None of that is about IT skills. So now the idea, and do you really understand the impact that good IT work can and otherwise make an impact on the business, right? Right. And so now what you do is look back in your past and see whether you've exhibited those kinds of characteristics before. So if you were in some way, shape, or form involved with computing and you're just moving into the IT infrastructure side of things, then you're going to have an easy way to transition those kinds of things. Because as an example, let's say you were a nurse even and you're transitioning into IT. Let's do that. And let's say as a nurse on the floor, you were one of the go-to people with regard to computing technology when somebody needed a little bit of help and IT was busy, or you ran the majority of the reports. There's something about that, right, that you could really tie in easily. But even if it wasn't related, like some kind of computing into IT, right, even if it's non-related, even in, let's say, I'll just stick with the example of nursing, what did you do that shows, attention to detail? What did you do that shows about solving problems the first time? If you're a nurse and you're transitioning IT, you can certainly talk about the impact of ensuring that computing technology is working well and that users are productive, because that has a direct impact on the patients. My point in all of this, I hope, is to say the details of what you did in past jobs might not matter very much, but the general characteristics of the types of work that you did. I was working with a professional, a person not long ago who in their past had managed veterinary clinics, and they were transitioning into being a high school science teacher. um and some of the things they had on their veterinary clinic experience had blood and feces, and they talked about the details of taking care of animals, right? And it's like, I hope none of those details and things like that show up as a high school teacher. Maybe they do, but it's not the good part of the job. But we started diving into it. What sets a high school teacher who's great apart from the others? Well, they can work with adults with a wide variety of different backgrounds because of the students. They can help people make good choices in difficult times and difficult decisions, that they can be very clear communicating to people of diverse backgrounds with regard to things that are important to them in their lives. That they care deeply about the success of their students, right? We'll transition that over into veterinary stuff. I mean, talking to people about the serious nature, I mean, easy to translate those kinds of things. So I hope that I'm making some sense, because I think that people get caught up in how do I translate the details of what I did into the new job? And I'm here to tell you it's not about translating the details. It's about translating the general trends and the general capabilities and the general conversation into the future. I'll give you one last example, and then I'll see if this doesn't answer the question. I was working with a um, healthcare IT um, company recently, a couple of years ago, actually. And this company writes software for hospitals and clinics, and they were bringing somebody into their user QA department. And I got involved. I saw the people who were applying for the jobs. There was a person they had already rejected for the job. The hiring manager had rejected just by looking at the resume. And I was just kind of going through the pile so I could get to know the hiring manager a little bit. And I was looking, and this individual had been in the military, and they had been a welder. And not only had they been a welder, they had been a TIG welder, which is really highly specialized, really fine precision. They had been a welder on fighter aircraft, and then eventually on the rotor parts of helicopters. And then when they got out of the military, they went into manufacturing of aircraft parts, and they went into QA, and they tested welds and torque and all kinds of things on these things. And they listed the welding machines, and they listed the all the details of the X-ray inspection machines. And they were applying for this IT QA job, and the hiring manager just summarily rejected them on resume review. So I picked up on the possibilities. I called this individual. They were super motivated. They were awesome, by the way. I mean, they really cared a whole lot, which makes a huge difference. And all I had to do was represent that over to the hiring manager. And what we did is to say they've got an extreme attention to detail. They've been doing QA work because, I mean, they had been doing QA for these fighter aircraft parts for over 6 years with a 99.99%, accuracy. They fill out complex forms, they dot the T's, they cross the I's, they do that for government work and the rest. And the next thing, the hiring manager is kind of going, I can't wait to talk to that person. I can't wait. And the truth is they got the job. They did a great job at it. And I showed them the old resume and stuff. And so my point in all of this is that all of the detail that this person had in their background with respect to welding and things like that did not apply. But their attention to detail, all those kinds of things did. And so you got to take what it was about the things you did in the past, translate that into ways that applies in the future. And it's not about the skills. It's not about the details. It's not about the tasks you performed. It's about the results that you created and the general notion of what it is that's going to make you stand out as what it is that you do. It's not going to be about the details of the tasks that you perform. That was a long-winded answer. I'm sorry.
No, it's great, Gary. Thank you.
Okay.
A couple other questions.
Okay, I'll try to be quicker.
Well, actually, this is perfect. We had somebody ask about, he said, I have a tendency to be long-winded in answering questions.
Yeah, you're like me, just like me.
How can I keep my answer brief and let the interviewer know that I am done with my answer?
So the great part of that was, how do you let the interviewer know that you're done with your answer, right? The first part of it is, how do you do that? Which is, I need to be better about this, which is I need to be a lot more mindful of what 1 to 2 minutes feels like. I'm a weird guy who does a lot of homework and stuff like that, and I read things. I'm just curious. So from a pure psychology perspective, answers that are less than about, 45 seconds or so long, people feel like you didn't consider it very much. And in fact, I have managers or interviewers all the time tell me it felt like I was pulling teeth. And what you'd find out is that when somebody says it felt like I was having to pull teeth, was they were given answers that were short, right? At about 45 minutes, it feels like you thought through the answer, but about 2 minutes or so, which I go way over 2 minutes, things begin to feel boring. So I think the notion is really just practice against what 1 to 2 minutes feels like. That's the first part. Just practice it. I need to practice it. The other part of it is that the way that you let them know that you're through is you literally hand the ball back. And this is a really nice transition. I'll happily answer any of the questions in this next thing. But the way to respond to questions well is that, you basically can short repeat the question. And I'll talk to you about this in a minute. But the way you can wrap it up is by actually handing it back, because you think about it like in terms of somebody threw you the ball and you're going to throw it back. And the easiest way to throw it back is to say, did that answer your question? Is there anything more you would like to know about that? Or I'm just curious, how do you guys use blue widgets here? So some way, and it's very often a question, that you can literally wrap it up with a question, because the question throws the ball back to the other person, because when you ask them a question, you clearly are asking them to talk and you must be done. So did that answer your question?
That's perfect, Gary.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool.
And again, all the questions are coming now. So you're welcome to continue with things if you'd like, or there's more questions here, either way.
Let's do this real quick, and then we'll go back to it. So I really like and appreciate answering the questions. So
okay, good deal.
So here's what we know. Here's where we're at. We know the company. We know the interviewer. We've imagined the problem. We've imagined the problem in the context of that company and with that person. We know how we're going to describe ourselves when we're asked, and how we position ourselves in that problem, solving those problems for that person in that company, right? And now we need to know how to respond to questions. So here's the deal. So I'm right here on 2.5, 2.5.1, 2-minute answers. Know what 2 minutes feels like. Less than a minute, less than 45 seconds feels like you didn't consider it. After 2 minutes, you begin to get boring, right? I think the answer to every question is about the problem and your ability to solve the problem, right? And the pattern to a great answer is this, which is an introductory answer. Illustrate that with a story or some experience, and then hand it back with another question. So If somebody says, "Oh, so tell me about, tell me about red widgets and blue widgets. What do you think about those? Have you worked with red widgets or blue widgets more? And how would you compare them?" I say, "Oh, cool. So, with regard to red widgets and blue widgets and their comparison and the rest, how about it? Would it be all right if I just give you an example?" Which, by the way, a weird thing is that when you get people to say yes, they like you more. So in conversations, sometimes in interviews, sometimes I'll, if I'm saying, "Hey, to open up our interview, I'm just curious, what I want to do is I want to start off by, kind of explaining who I am or where I fit in the scheme of things. Would that be all right?" "Yep, that'll be all right." "Okay, cool." So getting their permission makes people like you more. It's a weird thing, but it is. So it's easy to say, "All right, well, with regard to red widgets and blue widgets, let's talk about the contrast of that. Would it be all right if I give you an example?" "Yeah, sure, great." And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to illustrate my answer with some kind of a story, some kind of experience, and some kind of results that I've created. And the detail of the story doesn't matter so much. Hopefully it's one that has, where you can actually speak to results. Now, one of the things I hear all the time when people are in career transition is, "I don't have experience," right? Please don't confuse being paid to do something with having experience and expertise. So if it's an IT thing, let's say, and somebody asks you a question about something, if you did it in class, if you learned it in a book, I mean, you can still talk about it. I mean, that still works as experience. If you haven't done it all before and somebody asks you about, tell me about Active Directory, this is an IT thing, tell me about Active Directory and experience with that. Your answer might be, "You know what? Um, I would really love to have a lot of expertise in Active Directory. I'm certain that I doubt that I have the level of expertise that you would, that you would prefer, but let me tell you how I would go about solving that problem and other problems, because I can promise you that there are going to be other things they're going to run into. I'm a voracious learner. There are other things they're going to run into. So would it be all right if I just tell you a little bit about how I would go about solving that kind of a problem and other problems that I don't know as much about as I would prefer?" "Okay, great." So the first thing I do is I'll find out if there's any company policies or procedures. I'll do these kinds of things. I'll do my homework. I'll come up with 3 different solutions. I'll, run one of those by my peers. And ultimately, before I execute on something I haven't known before, then I'm going to double check with you to make sure that and I'll be able to bring you 3 different choices, the recommendation that I have. And then, so you can even propose. I wouldn't make up a hypothetical answer, but allow, get the permission to get somebody to allow you to show what your thought process and your approach is going to be. And then you always wrap it up with, "So did that answer your question? Would you like to know anything more about that? Or I'm just curious, what do you guys do with Active Directory here?" Right? Some kind of curiosity to dig into the question. That's the pattern of a great Q&A style conversation, right? Yeah. There are a bunch of questions that I have here, but the truth is that I find list of questions to be fairly worthless in the sense that, I can't tell you what questions somebody's going to ask you, right? And you can practice them all you want, but I think that if you understand the company and you understand the interviewer and you understand the problem and you understand yourself and you understand this general pattern for how to have a Q&A type conversation, then, you could wear yourself out trying to figure out every single question, the likelihood of them being asked. I mean, what kind of tree would you be, right? I mean, whatever, right? But I'll tell you about just a couple of them. So tell me about yourself. We already know the answer to that one. I'm a blank and a blank with this kind of thing. I'm a blank and a blank with this thing that makes me unique. I help these kinds of people solve these kinds of problems using these kinds of skills, right? That's the answer to that question. Why should we hire you? It's the exact same answer. Well, because I'm a this and a that, right? And with this thing that makes me unique, I help these kinds of people solve these kinds of problems using skills that include these, right? It's the same thing. One fundamental mistake you can make on answering some of these kinds of questions, which is why should we hire you and things like that, is one thing that drives me crazy, and I know that it drives a lot of hiring managers crazy and other people crazy, is somebody applies for a job and says, "Hey, I'm an excellent fit for this job." It's like, you got no clue. You have no idea. I mean, what you just showed me is that you make decisions without all the information. Somebody will tell me, "You're not going to find a candidate who's better than me." It's just like, really? Huh, that's really interesting. So you've interviewed the other 10 people, you know who we're talking to, you have a clue. So again, this whole notion sometimes of those kinds of things come across, it's less that it comes across as arrogant. It comes across a little bit as needy and what have you, but it mostly comes across as somebody who makes decisions without all the information. Probably don't ever do that. So don't compare yourself to others. Don't put it in that kind of a context ever. And it's always just about, it's, why should we hire you? Because I have the ability to solve the problems that you've got, because I'm motivated to solve these kinds of problems, that I understand that what I do in these tasks solve this kind of business problem, as well as being committed to helping ensure that you and your team are as successful as I possibly can. That's the answer to those kinds of questions, right? Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of them. Only other one that I see people stumble on frequently, and these are horrible interview questions, by the way, but you'll probably get asked them, right? Which is, what are your greatest strengths, right? Well, my greatest strength, and the answer, by the way, remember that every single question you're asked comes with this hidden part of the question, which is, in our company, on my team, given this role, in the kinds of problems that we've got, right? Put it in that context. So when somebody says, what are your greatest strengths? I mean, it's called, what are your greatest strengths inside of our company, in this job, solving the problems that we have, right? I mean, what are your greatest strengths? So put it in context. Your greatest weakness, right? The stumbling block there, I want to see people do, because I have interviewers who do ask those kinds of questions. It's a horrible question, but it's common. So people laugh, they say, so don't try to take something that's a strength and spin it as a weakness. Well, my greatest weakness is that I work so hard. I'm overcommitted. My significant other always complains that I work too much. Really? I mean, really? It doesn't work so well for you. So don't take something that's a strength and spin it as a weakness. Pick something that's a real weakness. Pick something that's relevant to the job. But the important part is, what are you doing to solve it? So I'll give you mine. My weakness is that I think that I can remember everything. I think that my failing is that I'm not terribly organized on my own. And that as a recruiter, there's a lot of balls in the air, and I'll drop some of them if I don't. So what I do about it is I take copious notes. I send myself emails, and let me tell you what I do to overcome that problem, right? So pick a real problem that's relevant to what it is you do and what it is you do to overcome that problem. There's a list of other ones here, but we could go on forever. But unless there are some questions that you want to talk to in particular, I'm not sure how valuable it is to go through a list of questions. So if there's so many that you got, please put them in the list. I'll happily try to address those. I think I already talked about this in number 4. When you don't know the answer, give an example of how you'd find the answer, how you find answers to the problem in the past. If you really want to, I think another great thing to do is to say, you know what? It's this Active Directory thing again. All right, so I'll tell you what it is that I know about Active Directory. I haven't had as much expertise as that as I would prefer. Would it be all right if I follow up with you tomorrow and I'll give you a little bit better answer for that? I'll send you an email about that. Would that be all right? And now I hand it back, right? I hand it back. So the idea is that an interview, it's not inappropriate to say, you know what, I'm a really quick learner. I love to do that stuff. This will be a great excuse for me doing that. I'll tell you what, I don't know a ton about it, but I'll get back to you with an answer. So certainly can do that. All right, I'm going to do this part, and then we'll be through with this prep section. We can go back to trying to answer some questions, because this is the majority of our time, but this is the stuff that really matters. Everything else is like, it pales in comparison. If you're properly prepared, then who you are, and I don't care whether you have flop sweats, I don't care whether you're nervous, none of those things are going to matter. If you're properly prepared, 1, you won't be as nervous, but 2, things are going to go so much better for you, right? So now we know the company, we know the interviewer, we know the problem, we know ourselves, we know how to answer questions. And so now what we got to do is we got to prepare insightful questions, because there will come a point in the interview where it's going to be your turn to ask questions or talk or whatever you want to call it. My transition always is, Karen, thank you so much for all of that. I think I got a good handle on your background. I'll sometimes summarize it for you, the key points or what have you, so you know that I listen to you. And I'll say, I'm just curious, what questions might you have for me, or what should we talk about now? Right? I mean, what should we talk about? Bam, now you're on. So the characteristics of a great answer or a great question at this point in time is that it shows your interest in the problem, either the technical problem or the detail problem, or what, or the bigger problem, which is the people who you're going to help in, or the interviewer's problem, or the team's problem, or the company's problem, right? So there's all kinds of things. So show questions that show your interest in the problem, questions that demonstrate your ability to solve the problem, and really, these right here are some of the best ones right here, which is things like this. Where, can you see my hand, by the way? Can you see that little hand? Does that show up on Zoom?
Your hand?
Yeah, on the
Yes,
screen
you
where I'm
sure
sharing my
can.
screen. All right, cool.
Hmm.
So what are the things that I need to do to stand out and be successful in this role? That's the style of question. That's the style of conversation. What do I need to do to be successful? What are the ways that I can contribute to your success? What are the team's goals? In addition to the detailed work that I'm going to do in terms of this, that, and the other, right? What are the other things that I'll be able to do to contribute to success? If I were to get a review a year from now, what are the things that what's going to really make someone stand out in this role? What are the things that they have to achieve, or what could they accomplish? How would I measure my success? What could I do to get up to speed so I could hit the ground running on day number one? Are there resources or other things that I'd be able to read or study outside of work? So, because it's important to me to be, really top of the class and great at what it is that I do. That style of conversation is the one that matters. All of the things that are what's in it for me things, I suggest you stick them in your back pocket and you don't worry about it. And I do understand that you're just curious, but especially all the things that are what's in it for me. How much does job pay? How much time off is there? What about benefits and all that kind of stuff? The point is that every word that comes out of your mouth, every phrase that comes out of your mouth, every statement, every question, just consider, is it likely to make the person who you're talking to more interested in you, like you more engaged with you? And if your answer is either no, well, I mean, obviously, if the answer is no, then really don't let that come out of your mouth. And if the answer is I'm not sure, then don't let that come out of your mouth. The big job that you got in an interview is to ensure that the conversation you have is going to make someone likely to be more interested in considering you further. And and really the style of that is that if they see that you're truly interested in solving the problem, you're truly interested in helping them, and you'll do what it takes, and that feeling is there the whole time, that's what goes on. So my question to you right now is, what is it about asking somebody about benefits that makes them like you more? Nothing. Well, then don't ask that, right? What is it about you asking about, what is it about you saying, I saw on Glassdoor some people have some concerns about, I'm just a little bit of concern. What is it that makes, what is it about putting your concerns on the table that makes them like you more? Nothing, right? I had an interview just the other day with somebody that was their whole deal. Well, I've been in roles before where they made these kinds of commitments, and I mean, they said we were going to get to hire a team, and it was a real problem. How am I going to know that you guys are going to actually really grow this team, so I'm not just the one who's having to do it all by myself? Well, the thing that's going to help you not have to do this by yourself is our interview is pretty much over, right? You're just helping, you're making this really, really easy for me, really easy for me. So we wrap up the call and say, hey, tell you what, things are going well. I'll be in touch with you in a couple of days, let you know what the next steps are. I go ahead and set up a scheduled message for a couple of days from now and say, hey, thanks so much for the conversation. I really did enjoy it. We're moving forward with some other people, so we won't be continuing the conversation. And it happens that fast, right? So all the things that are what's in it for me, all the things that show doubt, all the things that are focused on anything other than your root motivation to help other people be successful and to solve problems, yeah, don't talk about those things. Just don't, right? So, and all the stuff that you're curious about all kinds of stuff, right? Well, will you being curious about that thing make the other person like you more and more interested in you? If you're not sure, then don't be curious about that thing in front of them. Wait, right? Wait. The time will come when you'll get to talk about those things. And you know when the time is? When at some point the tide shifts, which is the company is now interested in you, the team is interested in you, and now when we're really interested in bringing you on board, now is the time to get the questions answered that really matter to you. And even then, don't ask questions that, if the answer to the question wouldn't make any difference as to whether you'd move forward with the offer, accept the offer, or move forward to the next interview, if the answer to the question would not change those things, then don't ask it. I mean, why would you ask it? It just, at that point, your question just became irrelevant, right? It's only relevant if it has anything to do with whether or not you'd move forward or whether or not you would accept the offer. Then it becomes relevant. Even then, wait until the end. It's not in these notes, but the other thing I really want to share with you, and I need to put them in these notes, is this, is that I think that people have this need to be seen, heard, and accepted for who they are. A lot of people do, and I get that, right? But the truth is that there's a pattern to the overall interview flow, which is, as we reach this shift where the organization is really interested in bringing you on board and things have gone well, at that point, they now already like you, right? And it's a lot harder to screw things up at that point. At the very beginning, and I don't like to compare interviewing and all this to dating, but I will just a little bit because it helps the analogy a little bit. I don't think it's like dating, by the way, and I don't think the company culture ought to be like a family. I'm not that guy. I'm kind of the guy that says, no, this is work. We can have a good time together, but this is serious stuff. But here's the deal. If you're dating someone on the first date, you probably don't talk about family. You probably don't talk about this disfiguring thing that you got on your back. You probably don't talk about those things. And so if there's something that you have that's important for someone to know before they hire you, and you don't think that it's something that's going to make them like you more, then hold off on even disclosure of those things until the tide's beginning to shift in terms of where, as an example, let's say that you have a special need that has some kind of a work accommodation. Let's just say that you need half a day a week to do something, or you need to, whatever it is. I used to use the example of you need to work from home one day a week, but right now you're working from home every day. But some kind of an accommodation like that. If in the first interview you say, well, I need to work from home, one day a week, and I'm going to go back to pre-COVID days. But, and if they're building a call center and you're the person, everybody works in the call center in pre-COVID days, and you're the person saying you need to work from home one day a week, it's really easy to say, nah, right? Nah, right? Why would we do that, right? Why would we? You just gave me, assume that along the way, people are looking for reasons to take you out of consideration. And if you make that assumption, don't hand them that thing. So, but if things went really well, you go through the whole interview process, people are excited about having you on board. And then before an offer comes out, you're saying, hey, there's something I really need to talk about that's really important. I've got this situation where one day a week I need to do this thing. And, unfortunately, there's no way around it. I mean, I'm hopeful that that's something that you could, that we could find a way to make this work. If they're already interested in you, they're going to go, yeah, we can probably figure out a way to make that work. That's all good. Right. So my point is, if you have something, some situation, some circumstance that may not be something that people are that doesn't necessarily make you better or doesn't necessarily make somebody want you more, then wait until later in the conversation before you put that thing on the table. Because early stage conversations, unfortunately, you got to assume that we're trying to find a way to get you out of consideration because we've got to narrow the field. Yeah. So what do you think, Karen? You want to go back to a couple of the questions or rest? Because that's what I've got to say about this stuff. And then we're going to talk about like a few other things. If we stopped right now, we've covered pretty much everything that I really want to talk about, but there's some other things in terms of follow-up, so we're going to go into how to actually perform in the interview and what to do afterwards. The part afterwards, by the way, is more important than what you do in the interview. Back to the person who asked earlier, interview badly, maybe you're nervous or whatever kind of stuff. All of those kinds of concerns matter far less than your proper preparation, and what you do after the interview, what you do in the interview kind of matters less in some weird, ironic sort of way. What do you think?
That's perfect, Gary.
Okay.
Actually, there's a question that really applies to that.
Cool.
We have somebody who's asking, how long after a second interview is too long to wait for a response or offer, and what action to take? So all of that kind of follow-up stuff would be great to cover.
Yeah, got it. Okay, cool. Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to get there, and that's a section of it. So let's make sure, I think maybe I'll answer lots of those questions when we get there. So anything else we should talk about right this second, or should we kind of move on to the next thing? Because I'm about to shift gears.
Yeah, you can go ahead and shift gears, and there are a few questions, and we'll get to them at the end.
Okay, cool. And we'll have plenty of time. So, all right. So let's talk about performing during your interview. And I don't have that much to say about this, except for a few things. Item 3, number 2 here, first impressions. Small talk is part of the interview. In fact, you have to assume that the interview begins the moment that you pull into the parking lot, right? The moment, it starts when you pull into the parking lot. Wash your car, right? Of course, you're probably not doing that, but maybe better these days is have decent lighting when you're going to be online. Do what you can to not have the dog in the background. Do what you can to not have the kids in the background. And you may not be able to accommodate everything, but make a point to try to be professional, to have a good image, to look at the camera, right? Because when you're on a video interview, you want to look at the other person. As soon as you look at the other person, you're not looking at them. So see, right now, I'm looking at the camera, so it feels like I'm looking at you. If I brought up the Zoom stuff and I want to look at, if I was looking at an audience or whatever, I just did this and now I'm interviewing while I'm looking at you, right?
And
I'm looking at your
actually, Garrett,
picture. Yeah.
your camera doesn't seem to be on right now.
Oh, well, it thinks it's on.
Oh,
It turned off and then turned back on, but okay. But my point is that, learn to look at the camera. Consider what the lighting looks like, right? If you wear glasses and such, try to have the glare off of your glasses. Position yourself in a way that somebody can see your eyes. Figure out, like, practice that, bring it up, go see how it looks, consider what's in your background. And you don't have to spend money to do these things. I'm just saying, make the best that you can of everything that's that's going on. Be aware of what it looks like, be aware of what you sound like, and do what you can to eliminate or minimize distractions. So that's the kind of the same thing to me as this whole notion of, from the moment you drove into the parking lot in the past, from the moment you turn your camera and your microphone on, and, to some degree, how it looks, what your lighting is like, all those kinds of things. And again, you don't have to spend money, just be aware of it, right? Check this out. See, part of my lighting. Oh, I can't pull it over here. Let me show you what happens. I got
except,
a, oh,
yeah.
you still can't see me. I was going to say, I got a lamp. I just got like a $5 lamp over here, right? That helps a whole lot. All right. I also suggest that you thank somebody for their time. Forget that this is an interview. What you need to do is to realize that this is not an interview. It's not about you. That what you're about to do is you're about to have a conversation with another person who has a problem. They would not be on the call with you if they didn't have a problem. The recruiter's problem is that they need to move some candidates forward in a hurry, that the team is going to say, wow, that was a really good use of my time. Enjoyed talking to that person, even if they're not going to get an interview. Your peers or your future peers on the team, their problem is that they need help, and they need somebody to be able to help them. They need somebody who's going to fit in with their team. They need somebody who's not going to bring a whole lot of, well, what we used to do over at XYZ company is. They need somebody who's going to drop into the chair, learn quickly, unlearn quickly, by the way, and, help them, right? And the hiring manager not only has that problem, but they've got other problems that they have to solve. They've got to grow the team. So just be aware of the fact. So when you first open up the conversation, thank them for their time. Hey, Karen, thank you so much for your time. And I can put it out there, just like I said earlier. Thanks so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. I'm here today to see whether or not I might really be able to help you solve the problems that you have, to be a significant contributor to your team, to your success, to the team's success, and ultimately to help the company and everyone be more successful. So I really do appreciate the time to do that. Thank you. I mean, go ahead. No one does that, by the way. No one does it. It's really kind of interesting to me. No one does it. You'll be the only one who does, and I think it's going to go really well for you. So, and again, I think we've covered most of these things, which is, it's all about focusing on the problem. I mean, if there isn't a problem, there isn't a job opportunity. So, I mean, these are the kinds of things you can talk about at the beginning. I'm interested to learn more about how I can help solve some of the key problems, to address the key needs and create a lot of success together, right? That is the whole notion of how you perform, which is, please be there to help the other person. Don't be there to find a job. And in fact, I think your whole job search, I don't even like the phrase job search. I mean, go find people who have the kinds of problems that you solve, and go build a relationship with them, and, establish something so that they want you to be the person who's going to be there to solve the problems that they have. They need your help. These people who you're talking to, they need your help. So, reach out to them, connect with them, and know that you're there to help. And the truth is that if you can't do the job very well, then you got to be hopeful to them that they will find someone who will, because it's not about getting the job. It's about getting help for the other person. The ironic thing about that is that you become more the person who's going to help them when you feel that way. You become better. They want you more. And the truth of the matter is that over and over and over and over and over, what I've seen is that the human being who sometimes has the best skill to do something is not the person who gets hired. It's the person who has good enough skills, who somebody wants to work with. And the main reason why, and people talk about, people, I think this is wrong when you hear people say they hire people who they like. I think people take that the wrong way. This is not about they like you and they want to hang out with you. It's called, I like you when you want to help me. I mean, you got a flat tire on the side of the road and you don't have the tools, and somebody bothers to pull over and lends you their, I mean, you like them now, right? You may not want to hang out with them, but wow, thank you, right? So that's the feeling of that. So first impressions really matter. The way you look, the way you dress, the way you see, the way you appear, the way the lighting, the way you communicate, and the way you introduce yourself, and the fact that you're going into this interview to see whether or not you can help them. That matters a whole lot, and focus on the problem, right? And I also suggest that, like this item number 7, which is, think of it as being assigned to a new project, and this is the kickoff meeting. And isn't kind of interesting that the person who's the hiring manager, when you get to interview with them, it turns out that when you get the job, that was the first meeting you ever had with your new team. Those interviews were the first meetings you ever had with your new team and your new boss. So if you think about them as, hey, this isn't an interview, this is a meeting that I'm having with the people who I'm going to go work with, right? Just, go there. I think things will go a lot better for you, right? Respond to questions with results, right? So it's always helpful in any of these things where if you can, somebody asks you a question, respond with results, not just an answer. Let me give you an example and have outcomes where you can, right? You can't always, but you can. Ask insightful questions. Here's the deal. Let's talk about compensation. This is 3.6. So ask insightful questions. We already kind of talked about that a lot. But compensation is here, this thing. So, this is the $64,000 question. We could have, we could spend a lot of time talking about this, but I got a few simple key points for you. Item number 1, 3.6.1, don't give a range. Don't give a range. If you tell me $60,000 to $70,000, I just heard 60. In fact, I not only heard 60, but I heard lack of confidence around it. And literally, as a recruiter, you tell me $60,000 to $70,000 a year, I go back and I'm kind of going, 60, we might could even get them upper 50s, maybe. I don't know. I'll keep an eye on it as we go. But what you just told me is 60 to 70, yeah, 60, maybe this, right? Maybe this. So it's pointless to give a range. What do you think? Somebody's going to hear the upper end of it? That's not going to happen. And don't lowball. And what I mean by that is, if you tell me 64,000, which by the way, that's what you should do, right? Somebody says, tell me a little bit about compensation, give me some guidance, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the answer. But if you're going to give a number like 64, 67, I mean, whatever the number happens to be. And you can say, and you could even laugh about it a little bit, 67, we all know that that's plus or minus a little bit. And we all know that it really depends upon a lot of other things, mostly the team, the opportunity, the things that I'm going to learn, but clearly, some of the other financial considerations related to healthcare premiums and other kinds of things will factor in. But, let's just start with, say, somewhere, 67. So give them a point in place. And what they'll do is I'll expand my expectation around that point, as opposed to when you give me 2 points, I just set you right down there. I promise you that's what happens. Don't lowball. What I mean by that is, when you say 64, it's not going to be above 64. And a few organizations I with are, but don't nickel and dime. Don't think that it's going to go up. And the other thing you just did is, recruiters will take you out of consideration when you get more expensive. And here's the reason why. When you told me 64 in the beginning and I relayed that, and then over time you try to get more expensive and you come back later and you want to negotiate the offer and you did that, you just put me in a very difficult problem and very difficult situation, because the hiring manager and HR is going to hold me accountable for having not gathered the information right in the beginning. So as soon as I have a candidate, I work a little bit differently, but the way that a lot of recruiters and HR professionals will have to act is that when somebody tries to negotiate and get their compensation higher in the scheme of things, it's really easy for me as a recruiter to essentially say, hey, Sally and I had a super clear conversation about that in the beginning. And just like, and I'm talking to the hiring manager or something like that, just like you, I mean, I think this is really inappropriate. I think it's way out of line. In fact, it gives me real it gives me real pause. It gives me some caution. So maybe what we do is, we got these other 2 candidates. Let's move forward with them. I'll keep this person on warm standby just in case, and bam, right? So yeah, don't post negotiate, right? It's a really bad idea. Don't nickel and dime, right? Don't nickel and dime. Here's one of the best things you can do around compensation is that, and this will often, I love this as an answer, which is, as long as, compensation is somewhere in the neighborhood of, of what's typical for these kinds of roles, I don't anticipate we're going to have a problem. I think things that I really value are this kind of motivation, these kinds of teams, those kinds of things, right? And so, as long as we're in the range of something that sounds reasonable, then I don't anticipate that we're going to have any problem with compensation, because that's not the most, it's important, but it's not the most important thing to me. So if in the end push comes down to shove, give a single number, don't give a range, don't lowball, don't expect that it's going to go higher, and don't nickel and dime along the way, right? Most companies don't jack around with it very much. I've worked with very few companies that play any games with regard to compensation. It's pretty straightforward, right? On the inside, from the insider's view, from a recruiter's perspective, it's pretty clear how it works. All right, last thing I got to tell you on this, and then we'll talk about how to wrap up your interview. Which is close your interview with next steps. So here's the deal. Number one, 3.7.1, never leave your interview without knowing the next steps and without having the contact information of the person who you're talking to. And the easiest way to get the contact information is at the very beginning. Hey, Karen, really do appreciate your time. Looking forward to talking to you to see whether or not I might be able to help you solve the problems. I'm just curious, what's your email address? Got it. Like right there at the very beginning. Never leave without knowing the next steps. And what I'll do is I'll say, hey, Karen, thanks so much for your time with the rest. I mean, what should I expect? I mean, today's Friday. Today, when should I expect to hear back from somebody? And Karen will go, somebody will be following up, right? And I'll go, well, I'll tell you what, if I haven't heard from anybody by the end of the day next Wednesday, I'll follow up with you, all right? What are they going to say? No. I'll follow up with you. And so I'll put it down on my notes. I'll put it on my calendar that by the end of the day on Wednesday, when I do follow up, and I'll talk about it in a minute again, but when I do follow up, I'm not going to say, I'm just curious, are things moving forward? Like, that's taking. What I'm going to do is, we interviewed last Friday. I appreciate your time. I promised to follow up with you. So here I am, basically. And then the thing I'm going to do in that, we'll get to it in a minute, which is I'm going to add some value. Since we met, I couldn't stop thinking about such and such, or I did a little bit of research and I found this, or I bet you already know this in the industry, but I found this article, or congratulations, I see this news, right? So when you follow up, it's not about following up to say what's in it for me and when are we going to move forward. I'm just next steps and I sent my interview. I'm just checking, right? Just kind of going, no. It's all about, thanks so much for your time. I follow up just like I promised that I would. Since we were talking, I couldn't stop thinking about, I did a little bit more research into, I found this thing that might be of value to do. Give them something that's of value. If you're not giving them something of value, there's nothing about asking them about next steps that adds any value to their life. It just makes you needy, right? All right. And even when you're closing the interview right here, item number 2, it's not how interested you are in the job, but how motivated you are to solve the problems and creating success. At the end of so many interviews, people tell me, oh, I'm really interested in the job. And my answer as a snarky recruiter is, yeah, you and 5 other people. What is it about you being interested in this job that makes me more interested in you? Nothing, right? Okay, cool. You just made yourself just like everybody else. Your interest doesn't matter to me. I mean, it does kind of, but not really. Now, it does as a human being, right? As a human being, it does. I'm just telling you how to play this game, which is your interest in the job. I can shave a couple of $1,000s off your comp now, right? You're interested in the job. Awesome. Great. That means I got control of the deal. You just gave me control. Thank you. I'm all good, right? But what's more important is how motivated you are. Hey, Karen, thanks so much for your time. I've learned a lot through this. The kind of problems that you're solving, including this one, are really motivating to me. Some of the problems you have around Active Directory, I'm going to do a little bit of homework and I'll get back to you on that. I would love for nothing more than to be able to dig into that. So I'm going to use things that I learned along the way. And what I'm going to tell you is how motivated and excited I am about the possibility of solving the kinds of problems that you have, because that's what I love to do, right? Psh, man, let's go. Your interest, yeah, whatever. Makes you just like everybody else. And the point is in this whole thing is, don't be like everybody else. As soon as blending in a crowded marketplace is a disaster, right? Don't blend in, be different. The key is, if I hadn't heard from this date, is it okay to give you a call? Is it okay to follow up? Get their permission. They're always going to tell you yes, right? All right. So here's how to progress after the interview, and we'll have a couple of minutes here. I'll wrap this up pretty quickly. I think we've already talked about this stuff. So if you're working with a recruiter and the recruiter asks you to follow up, please do. I always ask people to follow up with me. Less than 5% do, right? Less than 5% do. I have no clue why they don't. You have no clue how much influence recruiters have over what's going to happen, right? I have a significant amount of influence over what's going to happen. And what I know is when I say, hey, Bob, tell you what, I'll be really interested to know how things go. I'm super optimistic about it. When you get through with your interview, give me a call. I want to know how it goes. Yeah, I'd never get a call from you. I never even get an email from you. What? Right? And so now when the interviewer has doubts and they have concerns and stuff like that, and they're kind of going, I'm not really sure about this individual and those kind of things or whatever, I'm going to say, yeah, and I'd asked them to follow up with me and they hadn't followed up with me yet. Hmm. Yeah. So if somebody asks you to follow up, please do. My notion of email thank the next day, I really want to change that. I don't want you to send a thank you. And by the way, the follow-up email that you're going to send, that thank you, right? They're going to send, don't do it the same day. The whole point is to bring yourself back to top of mind. So I've had people who left in-person interviews or even online interviews, and within 5 minutes, I have a thank you. Yeah, okay, that's fine. But you just lost an opportunity because you're already top of mind. I'm already very well aware of you. And the thing maybe you don't know is that that message that you're going to send as the first follow-up, the whole point is to bring yourself top of mind again. So today is on Friday. Don't send that message to me until at least mid-morning on Monday. Don't send anything over the weekend because I got a big pile of stuff and you'll just be lost in the clutter, right? Mid-morning on Monday, even Monday afternoon. And the whole point isn't to say thank you. You can certainly say thank you, but your thanks is kind of like your interest, which it doesn't make you mean like you anymore. It makes you just like everybody else. But always what it is that follow-up that's like, hey, I appreciate your time last Friday. Just following up, since our conversation, I couldn't stop thinking about this thing, or I did a little bit of research, or I found this thing. Like, give me something. Give the person who you interviewed, give them something. Go do some homework. Go do something, right? And follow up, say, hey, just following, thank you. I really do appreciate your time. Okay, cool, nice. That won't make any difference as to whether or not you get the job. I believe that you ought to have a follow-up campaign, and I'm not a fan of waiting. Waiting is not a strategy. And so I think that your follow-up campaign looks like this: is always about focused on your interest in the problem, always about the motivation, and it's not in your interest in the job. It's your interest in doing the work, your motivation to do the work, your motivation to solve the problems, not your interest in the job. Your interest in the job feels like you want a paycheck. Always define next steps. And what I mean by that is that, add value by doing research. I think we talked about these things. But if I interviewed with Karen today, I would say, hey, if I hadn't heard from anybody by the beginning of the day, by the end of the day on Wednesday, it'd be all right if I follow up with you on Thursday. Okay, great. On Thursday, I'll follow up and say, hey, Karen, we interviewed last Friday. I appreciate your time. One of the things I learned in our interview was this: telling people if something you learned is something they like too, because they like to know that they taught you something. I really learned this thing, and I did a little bit of more research. Tell you what, I'm really optimistic. If there's anything else that I could do to add value, I'd welcome a call or a contact from you. Otherwise, if I hadn't heard anything by next Wednesday, I'll follow up. And I'll always make the commitment to follow up, so that if I send her the email and I didn't hear anything back, then the next Wednesday I'm sending a message. I'm going to say, hey, Karen, last time message I sent you last Thursday, I promised to follow up on Wednesday. So see me, I'm the guy following up with my promises. I'm not the guy who's bugging you. I'm just following up with a promise. And I'll send 3 messages, right? I'm going to interview. I'll send you a thing like, the day after. I promised to follow up with you like 3 or 4 days after that. And that commitment, I promised to follow up with you in another 3 days or so. And then that last follow up that I'm going to do, I call the takeaway close, which is after a few weeks, I'm going to follow up and say, Karen, I interviewed with you about 2.5 weeks ago on whatever Friday. I'm super motivated about those kinds of problems, but it's all good. But my assumption is that things are probably not likely to move forward at this time. I really do appreciate your time. If I'm still in consideration, I would certainly welcome, continuing the conversation. Otherwise, I really do appreciate your time. And if there's anything I could do to be of service to you, don't hesitate to ask. And I'll be the one who closes the door, because one, I don't have to think about it anymore. I don't have to worry about it anymore. I never have to say, I didn't hear anybody follow up the interview. Whoever told you that it's our job to follow up, right? I mean, I think we ought to, but whoever told you? So you can be the one who closes the door. And the other truth in that is that if you're amongst a bunch of other people who are in consideration, then if you're not so far in consideration, so what's going to happen is, if it's likely that you're going to get an offer anyway, and you send that email message over that says, hey, thanks so much for your time, I really do appreciate it. I'm assuming that things probably aren't going to move forward. However, I would certainly welcome further conversations. I do appreciate your time. Thanks so much. You feel like you're taking yourself out of consideration. And if you are still in consideration, Me as a recruiter, I'm kind of going, hang on, wait. Just busy over here, all right? I mean, hang on, right? And so there's very little risk that you beginning to shut the door like that is going to take you out of consideration unless the likelihood of you getting an offer was really low anyway. Then you might get a message that says, thanks so much. And the reason why people don't follow up is because they don't like to tell you no. It's very uncomfortable to tell someone no. But if they're really interested in you, you send them that message. Well, if you're in consideration with another person or whatever it is, it's a funny thing. We want what we can't have. And sometimes by taking yourself out of consideration, you make somebody actually want you more. So I think the bigger issue is you can just get closure, right? You can get closure. So after 2.5, 3 weeks or something like that, just give yourself the courtesy of closure by sending that message. All right. That's what I got to say about that. What else should we talk about?
That's great, Gary. There's one question that has come up a few times, and then there's a few more general ones. So the big question is, how do you address unasked questions or implicit bias regarding age for older candidates? So that topic.
Yeah. So the way that I would do it is that if it's something, there are two different ones, right? One camp is that you believe that there's some topic that hadn't been talked about that's likely to be a barrier for you, right? Might be ageism, might be whatever it is that you think that's a barrier. And then there's the other type of thing, which is the thing that you think is actually a positive thing that hadn't gotten to come up yet, right? But let's just start with the thing that you think is going to be a barrier. Step number one, whatever you think the barrier is, that's not usually what the barrier really is. You need to dig under whatever that barrier is. What is it? So if your thing is ageism, they're going to discriminate against me because I'm too old. Okay. Let's just say, no, they're not. What is it about you being, I'm 57. What is it about me being 57 that causes them concern, right? Dig under it. Well, they think that I'm not going to have the energy. They think that I can't learn this new stuff. By the way, more important than your ability to learn new stuff is your ability to unlearn stuff. The thing that hacks people off more than anything is people who won't let go of things in the past, right? Just let it go. So, they think I don't have the energy. They think I'm just looking for something in retirement. They're going to be concerned that I'm overqualified and I've always managed teams, right? All those things, right? What do you think the real concern is? Because I'm just here to tell you that it's not about your age. And even if it is, the way you can't change your age, but what you can do is change somebody's attitude about it. And so if you dig under that and you say, what is it? Well, it's my energy. It's that. It's not learning these new things. It's about only a few years till I retire. You can hit that head on. And the way you can hit that head on is to say, well, Karen, if I were you, I might be concerned about, my age. I mean, clearly I'll be one of the oldest people inside of this company. So let me tell you just a little bit about that, right? And by the way, all of the stuff that I think might have been the concerns, I probably should have demonstrated that through my actions earlier in the conversation. I should have demonstrated it. But I'd say, if I was you, I might be concerned about my energy level. And what I'd really like to say is, I think you can tell from the course of this thing, our interview or whatever, that I got plenty of energy. But whatever it is, you can put it on the table and say, if I were you, I would be concerned about my age. I might be concerned about the fact that I'm remote. I might be concerned about the fact that I don't have the level of expertise that you would prefer that I have. I might be concerned about how I've never really touched Active Directory before. I might be concerned that you think that I'm too young and I've never been in the workforce long enough. You might be concerned, if I were you, I might be concerned about the fact that I've got an hour-and-a-half commute, right? Whatever it is that I think you might be concerned about it. And then I'm just going to hit it head on, right? Dig under that thing, figure out what you think their real concerns are, and just flat out address them. I got plenty of energy, and not only do I have plenty of energy, I'm really quick to learn things. I understand that one of the big problems you probably have with a lot of other people who are like me is their inability to let things go from the past. I can't wait to let these things go. You might believe that I'm overqualified. I've always managed teams and things like that, but I can tell you that comes with not sleeping in my bed every single night. I'm so tired of managing other people. I'm so tired of all the headaches. I'm really glad to let you have those headaches. And what I can do is I can bring all the level of expertise and professionalism that I have on the table to not only solve these problems, but I can help you in every way that I can in terms of, I'm so glad you get to manage the team instead of me. I mean, whatever you think the concern is going to be, just hit it head on, right? So that's what I would do.
That's a great answer, Gary. Thank you. I know that will be very helpful to everyone. There are a few other questions. I know typically you're really great about staying on and answering those. It is noon though right now, so this is all of the content that Gary needed to cover today. If you do have to jump off right now, then there is a survey, and after we close it out, then you'll be prompted for that. We'd love it if you'd take that. And next time in 2 weeks on the 25th, we have another webinar coming up called Navigating Career Transition. I'm going to put the link to the chat in the chat for that right now. And the next question, Gary, let's see. One is about video interviews. When there's no one on the other end and they just give you questions to answer and record, then how do you wrap that up?
So my assumption is that it's just questions to answer and you go online and you record a video, right?
Yeah.
So, okay. So here's what I'd say about that. So I used to do these webinars. I used to do them live, and it was really, really weird to me when I no longer had an audience and I no longer had eyeballs and I no longer had reaction and I no longer had the energy of the other people in the room. And at the time when we first started shifting these over, there wasn't even a good way to have Q&A or somebody type to us or whatever it was. It was kind of that thing. I was kind of had a microphone and a camera, and I'm just kind of going, is there even anybody out there? What I found was that if I entertain myself, if I have a good time doing it, if I am like motivated and like I got energy, right? Things went so much better. And so my suggestion to you is that you still treat it like a conversation and you have the energy, right? And if it were me, and what I probably do at the very beginning of it is, hi, my name is Gary O'Neill. I am a blank and a blank with this thing that makes me unique, right? I mean, I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself. I help these kinds of companies solve these kinds of problems using skills like this. I really do appreciate the opportunity to see whether or not I might be able to the person who can help you solve your problems. So my assumption is that this set of questions we got is going to help us solve those problems. So let's dive right in. All right. All right. Question number one. I'll probably even read the question. Question number one is such and such, right? All right. Well, so, would it be all right if I give you an example? Okay, great. Right. And, you don't have to have necessarily that kind of finesse or whatever it is, but I'm just saying, treat it as a conversation. Like, look at the camera, speak to the other person, and try to pretend that they're there. In your mind, try to pretend that they're there. And as I'm wrapping it up, I get down to the bottom of it and saying, I hope that I've done a good job of helping you understand how motivated I am to solve these kinds of problems, right? To really dive into your organization and not only perform the task and the responsibilities, but to make a real difference in the organization, to make a difference with regard to my team members, with regard to those other kinds of things. I'm a blank and a blank with these things that make me unique. I really do appreciate this opportunity. And, thank you so much for your time. Bam. Right. So treat it as a conversation, pretend like the person's on the other side and pretend like they're in the room, and you have to give a performance on a stage. Right. And then pretend like the audience is going to go wild. Whoa. Right. I don't know. That's my answer. That's what I would try to do.
That sounds great. Thanks, Gary. Another one is,
Sure.
how do you convince people that your skills are transferable for a job?
I think the first thing is to not try to convince anybody of anything. I think the idea is you can demonstrate, but you can't necessarily convince. And I think what you have to do is that um, it's your job to position the expertise, the experience, the things you've had in the past in such a way that the other person can see how it's relevant to where it is you're going, so that they can say, oh, that makes sense. So as an example, I'm going to go back to my welder example. That welder in their resume, and they were doing QA on welds and torques and stuff like that. In their resume, they talked about the welds, they talked about the welding machines, they talked about the x-ray machines. None of that was relevant to the job that somebody was moving into. So what you have to do in terms of quote unquote convincing someone is demonstrate those things that are relevant. And all we had to do was shift it over to say that, extreme attention to detail in that particular case, right? Filling out all the forms properly, crossing all the T's, dotting all the I's, repetitive work. So it's all about trying to take whatever it is that you have and have done in the past, and what about what you did in the past is relevant. And very often what you'll find is the details of what you did aren't all that relevant, but it's the things around them and the general characteristics of who you are and your commitment to solving problems and things like that that are. So I think step number one is let go of the feeling of trying to convince someone, and instead grab the feeling of trying to demonstrate to someone. And the thing you're trying to demonstrate is commitment to solving the problem every single time, commitment to making things happen, and commitment to having the kinds of characteristics that are going to make you successful in the role. There's nothing about trying to tell somebody, well, I mean, the electronics in a car are very much like a computer and stuff like that. I got one final thing to say about that. And it's this. The reason I was trying to figure out why I want you to not try to convince someone. Here's what happens when you try to convince someone. In Austin, Texas, where I live, there are a lot of people who work for Dell. Dell's a huge company. Most companies here aren't. There's discrimination against people who've been there for a really long time because these small companies think that somebody can't make the leap from a huge company. And the most typical thing they do is to say, well, Dell's really entrepreneurial and you don't really understand. We really operate. And so as soon as you try to convince somebody of something they have concern about, you just reinforce the concern because somebody's going to go, you don't even understand why I'm concerned. So what you have to do instead is, if you think there's something they're going to be concerned about, is say, I understand exactly how you feel. In fact, if I was you, I would feel exactly the same way, right? Align with them and then demonstrate your commitment to either figure it out or something like that. So if you're trying to convince somebody of something, I think it's probably not going to go so well.
That's a great answer, Gary. Thank you. And then there's one last question, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. So there's a person who's having a hard time with that question about where do you see yourself in 5 years? They always seem to struggle on that one, and they certainly don't want to come off as needy.
Sure. So I think that, so thank you for not wanting to come across as needy. That's needy isn't pretty, right? So my pat answer to that one would be that if you know the company and you know the problems they have to solve and you know the work that you need to have done, right? If you did your preparedness, right? Then where I see myself in 5 years is someone who's grown into this particular role, someone who's been able to have made a significant contribution to the success of my team, someone who's been able to make a significant success to the contribution of the organization. I see myself as somebody who's become, been able to master not only the things you need me to do today, but an increasing number of different tasks and capabilities. I see myself as someone who's earned the right to take on additional responsibility. I see myself as someone who's setting an example on the team that other people could try to live up to. And I see myself as somebody who's grateful for the opportunity to make all those things happen, right? Something like that. I think that as soon as you try to go to detail about where you see yourself, I don't even know that that's the question that somebody wants. I mean, what they want to see is, are you going to work hard? Are you going to be focused on the problem? Are you going to do those kinds of things? And since you don't know where it is they expect you to go, I think you can't go wrong with saying, I see myself being awesome at what I do and increasing my skills and capabilities. I see myself as a massive contributor to solving these kinds of problems. I see myself making a difference in the lives of my team members and my supervisor and making a significant impact on the success of our company. I think you can't go wrong.
That sounds good to me. I'd hire somebody who's talking about those things.
Did you buy it?
I did. I bought it for
Okay,
sure.
good.
All
Cha-ching.
right. Yeah. Okay. So, folks, I think that wraps us up for today. If I put in the email, so if you do have questions afterwards, if you need to see the link for the recording or any of that, then please do send us an email. The link's also in there to register for the next webinar coming up. And then if you would take a minute to fill out that survey. And again, thank you so much for being with us today. We're very glad you're here.
Karen, thanks for having me, and hope everyone got a couple of nuggets you can take away. So thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. All right. Everybody
Bye.
have a great weekend.